Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. And I know it's been a while and I did promise a lot of you when I actually return, I wouldn't be disappearing again. And I haven't really and actually disappeared. I've actually been very, very busy on this 911. Now, as many of you guys know, this car got brought to me by my friend for a small bit of work from what I understood. This car has ended up becoming a bigger job than obviously I thought and my friend thought, and therefore he actually sold it to me. Now, obviously, I'm in the process of trying to get this car done to get it off my lift, but this car is needing a big, big overhaul because as many of you guys know, we're in the UK here, so there's a lot of salt used on the roads here throughout all the winter, and obviously where our island is surrounded by water, there's obviously salt in the air, and I think this car had been at the seaside at some point in its life. Now, I have done all the control arms on this car, which I'll go around and show you in a minute, so everything is brand new. I've also done all the coolant lines, so all of them are brand new as well, the crossover pipes. I'm also now doing all the brake lines front to rear, so I've took out all the brake lines, redoing all the brake lines because they are badly corroded. Many of you guys know they use steel brake lines on German cars because obviously copper is not TUC approved to be used on cars in Germany, which coppers I believe is much better than steel brake lines anyway. But yes, they're steel ones which have only got a lifespan for 10 to 15 years before they need changing. Now I'm trying to get this car fully prepped because as many of you guys know, this is a very rare 911 model, and that's purely because of it having a sunroof. The Recaro sport seats with the embossed headrests, it's got embossed armrests, obviously got the PASM, you know, it's got the Mercedes gearbox on this as well. It's a very, very rare spec on a 997. Now, if you don't know about the Mercedes gearbox on this, it uses the 722.6, which is used in the AMGs. Many people won't be aware of that. The gearbox is very well known, readily available, cheap on parts, you know, cheap to rebuild if it goes wrong, not like the ZF one that is used on the later 997s. This has the super ultra reliable Mercedes gearbox, which everyone knows is very, very good for tracking, and you can also put a tune on it, which this one's already got a tune on the gearbox. Now, another thing I'm going to be showing you in a minute is I did get the engine out of this car. There is no engine in this car. The engine come fully out, and I must say this has been the most simplest car I've ever removed an engine on in my life. I think it was about, what, 5, 6 components to remove, a fuel line, power steering lines, aircon pipes, engine mount bolts, gearbox mount bolts, and the whole thing just drops. It was one of the very, very easiest engines. Now, the reason I actually found it easy is because I cut off the exhaust clamps for the back boxes, because again, I'm not reusing them. So I cut them all off. The only thing I didn't cut off was the headers, of course, but I cut off all the back boxes because I'm not putting them back on whatsoever. I'm buying stainless steel ones when I put this car back together. I know many of you are probably, you know, wondering why I'm so busy with this Porsche when I should be doing BMW stuff, but this car is trapped on my lift at present and it cannot move. I can't get a BMW in here, and I'll be showing you why in a second, because I have the engine all over the place and parts all over the place, which I don't want to bring another car in and get it all confused. But I do have good news on BMW stuff. When we finally get the BMW in here, it's going to be BMW E60. That car needs rebuilding. Obviously, where it was sitting for a whole year, the piston rings have obviously been shot. And obviously after doing this engine, I am going to be rebuilding the E60's engine because the piston rings are just completely shot. It's chucking blue smoke, it's not drivable, it has to be sorted. CCV hasn't cured it, therefore that car needs a rebuild, and parts are very readily available, very cheap for it. So I will be doing a rebuild on that engine. It is overdue and it needs to be done. I was going to put it back on the road, then it started chucking the blue smoke. I can't take that chance, and therefore that one's going to be rebuilt. While I've been doing this as well, the 130i decided to explode all this coolant everywhere, and that was due to a crack in the neck of the radiator. As many of you guys know, on the later M52s, there was a plastic radiator neck that cracked. The upper radiator hose obviously exploded. The coolant flange was cracked and literally just fell off. Yes, I've been having a coolant problem with that. That's all rectified now, but with new radiator, lower coolant radiator pipe, lower and upper radiator pipe, new coolant flange, new reservoir. I overhauled the whole coolant system on that 130i, which is now perfectly good to go and should last the lifetime of the car. It's the only thing the last owner didn't do. But back onto this car, there is a lot that I've done on this, and I will go around and now show you on the camera. So as you can see here, I've replaced every single control arm. So I've replaced the 2 upper ones, I replaced the lower toe arm, and I also replaced the coffin arm, which is not cheap by any means whatsoever. For the 2 control arms up here, you're probably talking about £80 each. These are around £80. These are all male parts, so no cheap stuff. This is all male control arms all over the place on this car. You can see all the numbers up here as well. They're all male. I don't use anything else for Porsche, and I don't think anyone else should if they're buying a Porsche. I mean, if you've got the money to buy one of these, you should have the money to afford all the parts. So I replaced all the control arms here on this side of the rear. And if you can see here over the other side, I've replaced all the control arms on this side as well. That includes all the tracking forks as well. So obviously you've got the 2 up here, your toe arm, your coffin arm, and you've also got your rear tracking fork up here as well, which have all been replaced for male parts. And that's purely because I didn't want no issues whatsoever. So that's why I just replaced every single one. And I'm gonna explain more why I've done all this later on in the video, because there's something that I need to tell many of you guys, many of you guys probably ain't aware of yet. But yes, I've overhauled everything on here. Probably also can see here, this is where the transmission actually sits. This is where the engine's been taken out of the car. So everything in here is completely empty and completely stripped. There is no engine inside the car while I've got it out. I'm gonna be explaining to you in a minute what we're gonna be doing with that. A lot of you might be excited. A lot of you may know what's gonna happen. A lot of you may not, but I will be explaining to you in a bit what's gonna be happening with that engine. Now, if you can see here, these are all the old brake lines that I'm actually removing. They're all come down. I'm just waiting for the new ones to come. Obviously, I'm leaving there to remember the routing of them, which one goes where. I've also got the crossover pipes that run here on the engine on the sides out of the car. I'm gonna be replacing them as well, going to the middle section. You can see there, the middle crossover pipes down the middle section of the car. They're still there, they're still fine, but the ones in the engine bay area going to the water pump, the thermostat have all been ripped out and removed. If you look up here, this is where the coolant pipes actually run. Obviously, that's your ECU plugs for your gearbox and your engine ECU. Obviously, they come out with the engine. All the pipes usually run up here. They've all been removed. You can see all the aircon pipes all sitting here. Everything's been left in the engine when we've actually took the engine out. So I'm just waiting for new pipes to come for that as well. Before I put all the pipes on here and put it all back together. Everything's going to be new on this car, and there's a simple reason for that. You can also see here, this is all the new coolant lines that I've installed. So that's the full crossover pipes on the subframe. Every single one is brand new, including all the tracking forks, coffin arms, the lot. Everything is brand new on this car. I've even replaced all the drop links. I've replaced everything on this car. Everything that come off has all been replaced. So if I ever have to remove anything again, it will be a simple job to get it off. Every pipe has been replaced under here, even the plastic ones, all the crossover pipes, the aluminum ones, the rubber hoses, everything. In here you can see this is all the new coffin arms. Obviously, many of you guys saw I had to cut them all off. These are the new drop links. These are male ones as well. And like I said, every part on this car is male. These are all the front ones. Everything's been replaced. There's a lot of money to replace all these control arms together. I believe for the front and the rears to overhaul everything, including the tracking forks, it was about £1,700 to replace every single control arm on this car, including the drop links, which isn't cheap to get male ones. And that was drop links front and rear. I've got all new drop links, all new bolts, all new control arms, the lot. So this car is like literally good to go. So this is the other side, and if you can see there, this is left. So you know I'm on the other side of the car, and these are the other coolant lines that were replaced. Obviously, as many of you guys know, where they use aluminium to aluminium here, they end up just, you know, seizing together, so you can't get them off. So you have to replace every single one under the car. That's what I did. I replaced all of that, got everything done, replaced the plastic tubing distribution pipes as well as all the control arms on this side. And if you can see up here, this brake line up here is the one we're going to be taking out, which sits around the back of the chassis of the car. We're taking this all out and then running all the new ones to the car, because I'm replacing all the brake lines as well while I'm in here. You can see there again, all the new control arms, so the new male drop links, the new coffin arms on all sides. Every single side on this car has brand new control arms, brand new drop links, brand new everything. This car is going to drive like it just left the factory. It's going to be absolutely incredible. I cannot wait to get this car on the road and do the break-in service of everything on this car, because obviously I've done all new control arms, all new brake lines. We're going to be bleeding the brakes. We're literally overhauling everything, which is what you would expect on an 18-year-old 911. You know, everything needs replacing, and I've literally replaced it all. But like I said, it is not cheap by any means. So if any of you are thinking this is cheap, like BMW, you can buy a whole set of front control arms for £150 or £200, you are completely wrong. The whole set for the front control arms will cost you about £500 to £600 just to get every control arm you need, and plus the bolts to overhaul everything on the front side alone, and that's just control arms. That's no struts, there's no springs, that is nothing, so do bear that in mind. Now, if you can see here, this brings me to the engine, and if you can see here, this is the flat 6 M97 engine. If you can see here, I've got all the ancillaries off the engine itself, so that will be intake manifolds, all the sensors, all the ancillaries, so the aircon compressor, power steering pump, everything that needed to come off. This engine has never ever been overhauled in its life. The reason I got it cheap is because, yes, as many of you guys know, this engine is bore scored. It's bore scored on cylinder 5 and 6. I already done the bore scope as well just to confirm myself. It was already confirmed it was, but I just wanted to be 100% sure it was that, and I was correct when I put my scope down there. These cylinders are completely scored out and completely scratched, so these are going to be getting sent off to be re-sleeved. Now, if any of you guys don't know, this is a Mercedes-Benz transmission, and you can probably see it right there on the right, and it says Mercedes-Benz. So this is a Mercedes gearbox. This is what they use in the S-Class AMGs, the C63 AMGs. What else do they use it in? The E-Class AMG, so the E63 AMG, all of them, this transmission is used. So it's a very, very solid transmission. Doesn't go wrong, and it's the preferred transmission for track use. But it has one issue. Where this isn't a genuine Porsche gearbox, which no gearbox is, even ZF, this gearbox has right here an adapter to make this gearbox fit. Now, if you can see, this is the adapter, and this is where the gearbox bolts onto. So this is where the transmission will bolt to the adapter plate. Now, these are the bolts for the adapter itself. There's 3 of them, and there's one that faces the back with a nut. The issue we have with this is it's got all Torx bolts. Now, the front ones here, all along the top here, you can get to. But then you've got ones that are sitting that side like that. And bearing in mind, because of all the salt on these roads and all the corrosion, them bolts have seized in place, and you can't get them off. Nothing will turn them, not even a little Torx Allen key, no nothing. Nothing will turn them, they are completely seized, solid. You can't even get a ratchet in there because there is no space. I would have put the camera down there, but it'd just be very hard to see what I mean. There is no space to get this gearbox off, even with an Allen key. Now, one thing many of you are gonna say, oh, look it up online. There is zero information online about removing this gearbox from an M97 engine. I think this is the worst gearbox Porsche ever put on the M97. That's purely because the reason there is no information on this gearbox is purely because it was used in the Porsche 996 turbos and the Turbo S's. This gearbox was not used on any other cars apart from the turbos, and this is causing a big problem because it's mated to the M97 engine, which, because the turbo engines never have to come out because they don't have many issues, nobody's really removing the gearboxes on them to separate them, and most people that do, it's very rare that you find someone with an automatic transmission. So many of them have a manual, so therefore it's not set up the same way as this one. Now, this, apparently, from reading online, is what makes you a very, very good Porsche specialist if you manage to remove this engine with the transmission. And that's purely because you cannot unbolt this transmission and leave it in the car. Many of you are going to say, why didn't I leave it in the car? You can't do that because there's not enough space between the bell housing and the torque converter to come out to clear for the engine to drop on its own. This is the only gearbox that you have to take it out with the engine. And this is why a lot of people don't like the Mercedes transmission for that reason, because you have to take them both together. You cannot leave one in the car, because could you imagine trying to take the engine and this gearbox would be in the way? The torque converter is about that size. So you can imagine it will not pass. So you have to drop them together. You have no choice, zero choice whatsoever. And that's why people opt for a manual and not this one. I've got myself in a bit of a pickle, but I did get the car cheap also. So I've got to bear that in mind and factor that in mind. I've already stripped down the ancillaries, but obviously I got told by one of my good friends to stop and leave it because he is going to come and help me finish stripping this engine. We're going to get this gearbox off, separate it, and we're going to split the case as well and get them sent off to a good friend of mine who owns a machine shop, and I know he's very, very good because he owns 997s himself. And no, I know many of you guys are going to say Forte or LN Engineering. I wouldn't send to any of them. I've got very good friends who have a very good reputation in the race industry, who are gonna re-sleeve this for me, bore it out, hone it, and put the sleeves in. And I know, because he did his 3.61 around 60,000 miles ago, and his one's still running strong. He's got a 3.6 Carrera that had bore score, has no issues. I know he knows how to do it. He makes his own liners, gonna slot them in, and we are gonna get this engine back together. This is where I've been, guys, and you can see here, my shop is a complete wreck. I've got a big engine out here. You know, it's not really that big. It's this gearbox that makes it look massive. This engine is a very, very tiny engine compared to usually, you know, what you see usually on a BMW. This is a very tiny engine, but obviously this gearbox is making the car look absolutely humongous, which is not. I'm trying to get this ready, so I'm not stopping doing BMW videos, but you can see what I've got myself into. Parts are literally everywhere in my shop, and I'll show you that in a second where all the parts are. It's just a complete wreck. So that's where we are with the car, and this is why I haven't been doing BMW videos. Now you can probably see here, this is just all the stuff off the top of the engine. Now there is a hell of a lot of stuff. Oil cooler, alternator, power steering pump, aircon pump, you name it, vacuum pump, you name it, everything is there that belongs on the engine. Obviously we've got a lot of stripped threads from the bolts breaking off and the header bolts breaking off. It's just a numerous amount of things that we need to get through, and obviously we're trying to get it done as quick as possible. You can see here everything's everywhere. Most of this stuff is going back on, but the majority of it is not. So for instance, water pump I'm replacing, power steering pump I'm probably going to put a new one on. I'm going to be replacing a lot of the stuff. I'm going to be cleaning all this up. There's just so much I have to do, so much before I put this engine back together and then put it back in the car. So you can see here on the table as well, there is a lot of stuff. You can see right here as I'm going through it, got the engine mount carrier, we've got the cross members, we've got the support bars, we've got obviously the throttle body bolts everywhere. It's just turned into an absolute nightmare taking this car apart. I've got bolt bins with all the bolts labeled for what come off where, just everything. I've even got the boot lid sitting on the side here as well, which I've took off to make it more easy access to work inside the engine bay to remove everything, which sped up the time to get the engine out because I could reach everything perfectly. Just everything is everywhere. We've got a lot to do, and I really cannot wait to get this car done. And like I said, a good friend of mine is coming to me to help me. Me and him are gonna do this. We're gonna spend a few days getting this all separated, getting the case off sent, and then he's gonna be joining me to rebuild this engine. Okay guys, so as you've seen there now, you've seen what I've actually been doing. And like I say, I'm not doing nothing interesting. You guys ain't missing nothing. I know many of you guys don't really want to see this. That's completely fine. But I do want to know if many of you guys want to see us rebuilding the engine, because me and my good friend are going to be rebuilding this engine, and we are also going to be taking it apart. If you do want to see that, I'm happy to put in a time lapse for many of you guys to actually see it, in case, or you know, in the future you want to actually buy one of these cars. Now, as many of you guys know, like I said, this is where we are right now with this 911. I'm trying my hardest to get this car back ready and back roadworthy. I'm trying to make it so it flies for an MOT. Brake lines I'm upgrading to copper purely because they do not rust. And in this country, still aluminum brake pipes are just no good in this country. BMW is the same thing. I always upgrade them to copper and I've never had any issue, no brake burst, no none of this stuff that many people seem to think happens. They've got a much higher strength. You know, they're more versatile, they've got more flex in them. So I'm going to be using them on this 997 purely because of that reason. And a new owner will never ever have to worry, because that is a big, big problem, especially come MOT in the UK, for brake pipes always failing. And then obviously to do a job like that, the engine has to come out again. Many garages will tell you 10 to 15 hours. So that's a job that the new owner will never have to worry about. Now, the good news about this car, guys, many of you ain't gonna probably believe me. Now, bearing in mind, I only gave 11 grand for this car. Now, in total, I will be working out what I've actually spent it when I actually finish this complete build. But I've already got a buyer for this already on the Porsche Club. He's already offered very, very good, strong money for this car, because obviously on the Porsche Club, it's very, very hard to find any 997 with this amount of work that's gone onto it. And obviously anyone's gonna want a 997 that's gonna drive like brand new from the factory. Nobody wants to get one that's all vague and have to worry about doing things. This one, an owner doesn't have to worry about doing nothing, literally dry store it. And this is good for more than 100,000 miles if you look after it. Should have no rust issues providing you garage it. But yes, guys, I have sold this car already for £32,000. This car is planning to be ready within the next month. The engine case arbs are going off probably in the next 2 weeks. They're going off, they will be back within a week. We will start rebuilding that engine, getting that engine back in this car. The brake lines will be ready. This car will be ready to get on the road. I need to get it re-MOT'd because I want it to have a complete fresh MOT even though it's till November. And then therefore, I've already took a deposit for this car. So this car is ready to be sold. And who knows what's gonna be on here next? I don't even know myself, but I can tell you now, I've made a very, very, very big profit on this car compared to what I bought it for, compared to how much I've spent on it already. I do need to work out the final cost when the engine's being rebuilt, but I'm still gonna be in probably about, I don't know, probably around 8 to 9 grand profit on this car, the way I'm looking at it right now. So I'm in very, very good margins at the moment on this car, on this 911, and I'm really glad. And it just shows you, if you buy a 997 at the right price and you do most of the work yourself, which I'm very lucky because I've got the lift, I'm able to get underneath it, do everything myself. Pulling the engine on this was a piece of absolute piss. Having the hydraulic table was easy as said then done. It was an expensive bit of equipment to have here, but it's a very, very handy bit of machinery. And I can tell you right now, I've been using it even to just carry my tools around before I moved the engine out of this car because it was so handy just to drag around and have my tools on. And it was well worth the £500 to buy one of them hydraulic tables. So if you have enjoyed this video, guys, like I say, do let me know if you want to see more on the Porsche engine. Thank you very much for watching. It's BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.